So welcome everybody to Women in Platforms. I think most of you have been here before. Our guest tonight is Phil Bray. Phil is the founder and director of the Yardstick Agency. And the Yardstick Agency offers marketing support to financial advisors, doing websites, marketing strategy, newsletters, and a whole host of things, but not just financial advisors. In fact, the Next Wealth website and the Next Wealth directory was designed by Yardstick, and Phil's expertise and knowledge was really instrumental for us in getting that off the ground. Phil started his career as a financial advisor before setting up the Yardstick Agency. He was head of marketing for the Sense Network, and the title of your talk tonight, is The Power of Content and Online Visibility, which I think is a really important topic, both as companies, but also as individuals, because as we're all stuck in a little box on the screen, we do need to make sure that we're maintaining visibility of ourselves, but also our businesses. Just a few housekeeping notes. Nobody's anonymous. I know who everyone is. I had to kick somebody out a couple of weeks ago because she wouldn't put her name and didn't have her video on. So anyway, so I will be ruthless. If there's any, so I think, Phil, you're going to talk for about 20 minutes. Is that right? And then we'll go to Q&A. 15.
Yeah, if that's all right with you. I've got no slides, but I thought we'd just have a chat if that's okay.
Yeah, of course. And I mean, most of you have been here before, but just as a reminder, if you have any questions, just pop them in the chat, put up your hand, and it's really informal. So Phil, welcome to Women in Platforms. Over to you.
Thank you. So this is my third webinar today, and it's the first one I'll be able to see people. So I spent 2 hours this morning chatting to a couple hundred people and didn't get any audience reaction at all. So it's quite strange being able to speak to people and see their faces, which is quite nice. So I think the first thing I want to talk about is, as I say, that the importance of visibility and being impressive online. And this applies to all businesses. The smallest financial planning practice right the way through to the largest platform or investment house. And it's been really brought home recently. We've been doing some interviews with the clients of financial planners to understand the journey that clients or prospects take to their financial planner's door. And we can make assumptions about how they do it, but unless we actually talk to clients of planners, we'd never actually know. And it's really clear that something we've been talking about for a while now is true, and that sat between someone becoming aware of a financial planner, or indeed any organisation, and them taking action, is that multinational organisation called Google. And every client we've spoken to, no matter whether they were referred to the planner by an existing client, referred by an accountant, looked upon and biased, whatever it is, everyone has Googled that firm before getting in touch. So sat between awareness and action is Google. And I suspect, it's a small data set right now, but I suspect that will continue as we interview more and more clients of financial planners. And it doesn't really matter, it doesn't seem to matter whether the prospect was referred, they walked past the office, they found the planner on social media or unbiased or actual or wherever. It seems to hold true. And it is pretty logical because we Google everything these days, don't we? I'm really lazy. I will Google things where I even know the URL because it's quicker to Google it. It picks up misspellings and you click on the link and away you go. So the first thing I would say is for all businesses, whether it's financial planning practice, platform, investment house, marketing agency, whatever, we need to make sure we're visible online. And you can do that by walking in your client's shoes, go to a private browsing window and run brand searches. And brand searches for your name, derivatives of your name, misspellings, that sort of stuff. And see what you see, or have a look at what you see. And can you be found? Are you visible? I know some financial planning firms who their name is so generic that they can't be found for a brand search, and that's a real problem, because somebody who wants to find them, either because they're just getting telephone number, email address so they can make contact, or they're doing a bit of due diligence and working out which planner they might talk to. Not being able to find somebody online is a real red flag these days. So go into Google and have a look at what prospects might see when they Google your business name or your individual name. The other thing I would say, if you want to see how many people are running brand searches, you can do that through your Google My Business listing. Google took the ability away a few years ago of understanding what keywords people were typing in to find your website. You can still look at your Google My Business listing and look at the Insights tab, and it will give you a good idea of how many people are running brand searches for the business. And what you should see, you should dominate that first page of Google for a brand search. It should be your Google My Business listing, top right-hand corner, your website and site extensions, top left. Yeah, top left. And the rest should be all about your business. It should be social media links to the FCA website, company's house register, blogs you've written, press coverage you've got. It should dominate our first page. And we need to impress people as well, which we'll come to in a second, because this is when prospects first meet you. And they don't first meet you when you come to the office or these days on a Zoom call. They first meet you online, and they meet you before you meet them. And at that point, you've got no right to reply. They will make a decision based on what they see. They will make value judgments based on what they see. So if you can't be found online for a brand search, you've got some work to do. If your business name is so generic that you're never going to be found, it's probably the time for a rebrand. And of course, occasionally there's some negativity there. I remember one firm, because we always Google firms before we work with them. We want to know who we may be getting into bed with, so we want to be careful. And I remember Googling one firm, and an FCA censure notice came up for some stuff they've done with Connaught. And that's not a good look at all. There's another example, but Heather's recording this, so I can't probably go into it. So we need to be visible, and we need to be impressive as well, because as I say, this is when people first meet you, and it's also where competition happens with financial planners. When I speak to financial advisors and planners, it's very rare that competition happens around the meeting room table. It's very rare that we're beauty parades to win the business. It doesn't happen very often. But competition does happen online, and it happens earlier. And that's because, for example, one of the clients that we spoke to, one of the clients of a planner we spoke to, was referred to 3 planners. And they did a bit of due diligence, a bit of looking around before they decided who to get in touch with. So competition happens at that point. And it's really important that we impress, and how we impress is via social proof. And we talk a lot about global and granular social proof. So global would be examples of the Next Wealth directory, where you have a rating. Sorry, Samantha, can you not hear me? Are you struggling to hear me? Can everybody else hear me?
No, it's a little bit crackly. It's a bit crackly, so I don't know if you have a microphone that you can use. That's why I came downstairs because I thought it was my Wi-Fi, so sorry, I've had a change of background.
Let's see if that makes any difference. Can you hear me any better?
Yeah, but we can't see you. But that's okay. We can hear you.
You'll be able to see me.
We see your logo.
There we go.
There we go.
Is that any better? Can you hear me better?
Excellent.
Good. Where was I? Yes, so global and granular social proof. Global, good example on the Next Wealth directory, where you have ratings for different providers, and providers have an overall rating. And for me, global social proof is when we have the entirety of the client bank talking about or rating the firm. So Vouch4 ratings, Google ratings, client survey results. And I'd always encourage firms to publish their client survey results. It's a great way of demonstrating authenticity. And then more granular social proof, client videos, client stories, written case studies, that sort of stuff, where the client is talking about the life-changing benefits of financial planning. And they're creating a bit of a narrative of what they needed help with, what their worries were, what their concerns were, what their aspirations were, and what was done broadly. And then most importantly, how things changed. What's the big change in their life? How do they feel? What have they been able to do? And trying to create that narrative with client stories and client videos. But as I say, really important that we are visible online and impressive online. And we've got firms we work with that have got 40, 50, 60, 70 Google reviews. And that's massive for a financial planning firm. Google financial planning near me and have a look at how many firms near you have got Google reviews. It will be a really small number, really small number. And there's so much you can do with it. We've really focused on it at Yardstick. And we can now say 3.5 years in that we are the highest rated marketing agency in Nottingham, which is quite nice. We can also say we're the highest rated marketing agency that specialises in financial services because we put a lot of time and effort into getting those Google reviews. So for me, be impressive online, be visible online. And that means developing social proof, which means running a social proof audit. What have you got? And whatever business you're in, whether it's platform, investment house, financial planner, mortgage advisor, whatever it is, do an audit of your social proof. It's not good enough these days to simply say you are good. You've got to prove it. And social proof is the perfect way of doing that. Heather, I've seen a few questions come in. Do you want me to answer those?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, go ahead. Unless, so does anybody want to ask the question themselves? Now, Paul and Alan, you put through questions. Did you want to add anything to what was in the chat? Alan, shall I start with you?
Beautiful. Where you go.
It's only quite a quick one, Phil. It's just about how long you've got for a prospect going onto your website before they disappear. Right.
So the average length of time on a financial planner's website is 117 seconds. Can I just share my screen, Heather? Is that okay?
Yeah. I think I put on screen sharing ability.
So you do that. Give me 1 second and I'll just show you something. Here we go. So on our website, if you go to the advisor website index, it allows you to compare your website data with that of the average for the financial planning sector. So you can put in there, right, I get an average of 100 sessions a month, and it shows whether you are above or below average. So the average length of visit from entry to exit on a financial planner's website is 117 seconds. They look at an average of 2-point-something pages. So Paul, the answer is not long. You've really got to grab somebody. The one thing I would say though is the most engaged visitors, and if we measure engagement by the length of time someone spends on a website and the number of pages they look at, on the basis of the longer you spend on a site, and the more pages you look at, you're broadly more engaged. Then the two groups of visitors who are most important are those who come to the website via an organic search. That might be a brand search on Google, or it might be a service-based search, so financial planner near me, financial planner Nottingham, mortgage advisor Derby, that sort of stuff. So organic-based searches will always be more engaged. They'll always look at more pages and spend more time on the site. And that's because they have a need, which you may be able to fulfill. And the second group of people which are most engaged are returning visitors. So we need to get the balance right between returning visitors and new visitors, because returning visitors will, again, always be more engaged. And you can get all those stats from Google Analytics. So,
sorry, have you got any examples, Phil, of some firms in the UK where they have, a good retention rate when people go to their sites quickly? And do you have any knowledge about how many sites prospects will visit in order to find somebody?
So it's a good take them in reverse order. No, I don't, in terms of the number of sites prospects will visit us, and that's why we're doing these interviews with clients, because we want to. It's a tiny data set right now, but we want to understand that journey, and we're publishing the interviews on our website. So there's 3 on our website right now, and we'll publish a couple more next week. My hypothesis is that if you're going to ask for a referral, you're going to ask people, it's probable that you ask more than one person. I suppose it depends how strong the referral is in the first place. But at the moment, I've got no data. I've got no data on that. And in terms of length of time on a site, I would be looking at, have a look at the Red Circle website from Darren Cook. Site we did, it's got a really good, it gets really, really good engagement. And I'd have a look at the TFP financial planning website. That's another one that gets really good engagement as well. Interestingly, both of those publish their fees online. And fees pages have a high time on page, a long time reading them, because they're generally quite long pages anyway. What I can't strip out, of course, is the number of people that are financial advisors looking at those to see what other people charge. So can't do that. I'd have a look at those 2 sites, TFP Financial Planning and the Red Circle site.
Great, thank you. Alan.
Phil, I think you've covered a bit of it, but it's a 2-stage question. The first one is I'm always interested to know whether a website is in financial planning, whether you believe it's there to capture a client, if capture is the right word, or whether it is there to validate a recommendation that's already been made. So that's kind of the first stage of the question. And the second stage of the question is, depending on the answer to the first stage, do you build the content any differently? Full stop. Stop waffling.
Oh, full stop. Okay, nice.
I was going to waffle then, but I won't.
Okay. I'm not sure the first 2 things are mutually exclusive, because of something Paul said.
I think, sorry, to clarify, I think my concern is how much time would you spend on optimizing for a search activity rather than making sure it's correct from a recommendation, like you've just recommended Darren's website.
Okay. Again, I don't think they're necessarily mutually exclusive.
Okay.
But we've got 2 groups of people who will come to the website via a Google search or via an online search. The first is those who are already aware of the brand. So they're searching for Red Circle Financial Planning. They already know Darren. They're searching for Darren Cook, Red Circle Financial Planning, something like that. So they're aware of him, they're searching for him, and they may be searching for one of 2 reasons. The first is they just want Darren's contact details, or they want to know some really basic information, telephone number, email address, does he have parking, that sort of stuff. So they've kind of already made the decision, and they're just looking for some practical information. Second type of search, when they're already aware, is they've been referred to more than one person, and they're doing some deeper due diligence. They're an advocate of Paul Lewis, who says you've got to go to a chartered firm that's independent, that are financial planners and charge fixed fees. And they're doing some deeper due diligence to understand, if they can, online, how many of those boxes does, in this case, Darren's website tick, or Darren's firm tick. And they will make their decisions based on what they see online. So we need to be ticking that box. And the content on the website, the pages on the website, need to do enough to convert those people and get them to take a call to action. The second group of people are those who find the website through a service-based search, so financial planner near me, financial advisor near me, etc. And that means getting your SEO right, frankly, which is a combination of different things. It's a combination of keywords and pages being optimized. It's content's massively important. Google reviews, link building, all that sort of stuff that's been part of SEO for time immemorial, since Google started. but the stuff you do for the first group will help the second group, and vice versa. Does that help, Alan?
Yeah, I'm curious because a few firms that I've worked with in the past are, and maybe it's because of what they've done previously, are very adamant that they get very little new client activity from a Google search.
Yeah.
So they won't invest much time or energy into SEO work. What they'll invest their time and energy in is to making sure that they're showcasing their business. You're probably saying it's exactly the same thing, but showcasing their business for a recommendation that is doing further due diligence.
Yeah, I think they could well be right, because I mean, clearly I don't know the firm, but for SEO to pay off, it needs to be it's a long-term activity. And I very rarely and it's probably a self-selecting group, but I very rarely come across a financial planning firm that's doing SEO well, because their patience and budget tends to run out before they start seeing results. And you've got to give SEO time. You really do. And it's part of a mix, but I think you hit on a really interesting point. Firms will often say to us, well, we're getting nothing through the website. We're getting no inquiries through the website. But what they forget is that every inquiry that picks the phone up or sends an email will probably have been on the website at some point. Yeah. So whilst the website whilst we can't actually prove Mr. Smith or Mrs. Smith went on the website, filled a form in, and they found it through a Google search, you can't necessarily see that line. The website has played a key part in taking them from suspect to prospect by getting them to pick up the phone because they were referred in the first place, saw them on Unbiased or whatever it may be.
Thank you.
Phil, I want to come back to the point you were making about social proof. And when you did the work you still do work for us, but when we first built the Next Wealth directory with Yardstick, after you asked me proactively if we would leave you a rating on Google, which is a perfectly reasonable thing to do. But I'm rarely asked that by any of the firms I do business with. And I think we're often quite reticent to ask for people to give us referrals or to, I'd like to hear a little bit more about, are you disciplined about that? Is that part of a process that you have that, post delivery you ask for a referral? Is that what you recommend to advisors? How do you approach that ongoing social proof?
So how we do it and how financial planning firms should do it are probably not too dissimilar. So when a project has been delivered, and I should make it clear that our Google reviews are available for anybody to go and leave a review. So I got a fake review about 18 months ago, and it really hacked me off because it was 1 star, and it was absolutely fake. And I got Google to take it down. So I just want to make it clear that our Google reviews are open for anybody to go and leave a review. I make a point of, when a project is finished, the client will get an email, if it's a website, handing me a website over, login details, that sort of stuff. And at that point, I will then follow up, ask how the project went, make sure they were happy, see if there's anything we can learn. And at that point, I will ask them for a Google review as well. And I really make it clear that, yes, I do want it from a business perspective, but it's a real boost for the team that was involved. So I think of a site we launched last week for a firm called Barrington Hamilton. The copywriter, the designer, the developer, was 3 or 4 people involved in the project. And it gives them a real boost to see them name checked in a Google review, or the fact that they're contributing to the overall profile of the business. And we will always make a point of sharing positive feedback publicly within the group, within the team, and clearly we share constructive feedback privately. Where we don't tend to share it is on social media. I'm not one of those firms who will necessarily cut and paste a Google review into our Twitter account or something like that. I just get a bit shy when things like that happen. So I would recommend that financial planners, in terms of online reviews, our preferred platforms are Google and vouched for. Happy to explain why if someone wants us to. But our preferred platforms are Google and vouched for. And we would, if we've got a big hole there when it comes to social proof, we would recommend doing a mail shot to the entire client bank, asking for Google and vouched for reviews. And we'll ask for both, because some people can't leave a Google review because they don't have a Gmail account. So we'll ask for both. Some people will do none, some people will do one, some people will do both. And we get that real hit of online social proof. Good example, firm we work with in London, four planners. In 6 weeks ago, we did a mail shot. At that point, we just did vouched for reviews because Google reviews were closed, and they've had 114 vouched for reviews in 3 weeks, which is really cool. So give it that initial hit, that initial shot, and then build a little process within the business so that after each review meeting or after each onboarding of a new client, you send an email asking for a Google and vouched for review. And some people will do, as I say, one, none, or both. But you've got to get in that process. The planner should ask the client, are you happy for us to send that email? And then the email should be sent by somebody else in the business, if possible, not the planner. So an administrator, a power planner, something like that. Partly because planner might never get around to it, and partly because it's good to just create a bit of barrier. And then finally on that, make sure that the email that's sent is the only thing that's talked about. So the only thing in that email that's talked about is the request for review. Don't put it on the bottom of a long email with suitability reports attached and all that. Make it a separate email so it stands out. And that way the client either has to do it or delete it. And they're probably not going to want to delete it. Sorry, Heather, another long answer to a short question.
No, that's really helpful. And I didn't mean to suggest that, because I'd sent you an email saying, thank you for the fab work. It was really great. And then you said, would you mind? It wasn't that you said, could you please leave a review? So I didn't want to create that impression. And I thought your point earlier about publishing client survey results on the website was also really interesting. And I had an advisor actually today email me a copy of his client survey results because he was really proud of the results they've had in a particularly difficult time in the markets, and they had some really positive results back. And so and I think I've not seen that, and I think that's a really really powerful thing to do.
Well, a lot of firms, when you sit down and talk to them about, okay, so why are you different, we'll get honest, trustworthy. If that's the best you come up with, you've got a few problems. But transparency, another good one. And it's all well and good saying these things, but you need to prove it. And there's two really good ways of demonstrating transparency. One is through publishing your fees online. Only 5% of firms do that. So publishing your fees online is a really good way of doing it. And the other is publish your client survey results, warts and all. 93% of our clients would recommend us to others. We're working on the other 7%. Publish them, warts and all. And the other thing we always do as well is we run client surveys for firms, and we'll organise the questions, we'll organise the mailer, but then we'll write a blog at the end of it, which they can share with their clients. I do feel that if you've asked clients to give up their time to complete a survey, you really should share the results with them, and that always goes down well as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and Paul pointed out through the chat that SJP do that as well, and you're absolutely right on that. Michelle and Brian, you've both had questions in the chat. Michelle, can I come to you to ask your questions?
Yeah, so a couple of questions. So one of the things we always think when we get Google reviews, for example, they're either really high or really low. There's sort of nothing in between. So people either rate you when they're really pleased with you, or they rate you when they're really unhappy with you. And so one of the things we always question is, even though we're very online SEO focused and everything else, is just how useful they are. But I guess it's quite different. So I'm answering my own question here as usual. have a habit of doing that. I guess it's quite different though if you ask for a client testimonial, because then it's a lot more specific and everything else. But I just question, yeah, the temptation is if I'm asked to give someone a review, unless it was absolutely disastrous, then you generally give people a, you know, the top rating. So I just wonder how useful it is in terms of feedback. And then my other question, which is also a bit random, was around the use of, in terms of targeting more searches and getting more hits on your website, then whether it's always best to go with your brand name or whether, you know, the name of another website might be useful. And the reason I mention that is because when we launched our business Smart Pension, we went with, which is an auto-enrollment, initially an auto-enrollment pension business, but now sort of platform technology. We happened to get the website autoenrollment.co.uk and just ranked above, and happened to rank above the UK government in terms of auto-enrollment, just purely because we were lucky enough to get, some would say it was genius, it was a genius move by one of our co-founders at the time, but it's also quite lucky to be able to get a hold of that website name, because nobody would have known who Smart Pension was. And arguably a lot of people still don't know who we are, but auto-enrollment clearly got lots of hits because everyone was looking for auto-enrollment providers. So I just wonder, when you're having conversations with clients, whether you know, that's an active discussion or whether that's just quite unusual.
It's an active discussion when it makes sense to have it.
Yeah.
And you're right. If you can get keywords in a domain name, that's a very good thing. And I can't think of another example off the top of my head, but the one you give is a good one. So the brand is Smart Financial, the domain is auto enrollment. I think it's clearly preferable if you can get those keywords in a domain. When we're starting to deal with clients, though, they've often got, the domain has got some history, it's got some authority, and therefore to change it would mean changing email addresses and all sorts of different things. So typically we will we'll keep it the same. Where we do get involved in that conversation is if we are, quite often for new start businesses, we'll get involved in the naming process. So what are you going to call your business? And they will have the name and then a suffix. So wealth, financial planning, financial management, that sort of stuff. And we'll always encourage them to go for a suffix which accurately represents their business. And if we can get financial planning, for example, in the domain name, that will help as well. So rather than XYZ FP for financial planning, we'd encourage them to go for financial planning in the full domain, if possible. So yeah, it sounds as though it was a stroke of genius from whoever came in up at your end, and it works. It's obviously worked for you really, really well. In terms of Google reviews, yeah, I take your point. There is something binary about Google reviews, and you occasionally see a 4-star review, but not often. You're right, and it's really rare that I see a financial planning firm get a 1-star review when they are actively pursuing reviews themselves, if that makes sense. It just doesn't happen very often. And you can tell when someone's had a 1-star review because it's generally a 1-star stacked with a load of others that have been gathered in a very short period of time because they've tried to push the 1-star review as low as they can. And interestingly, on vouched for, and it's interesting to note the difference actually. On vouched for, we see average scores for the planner and the firm of 4.7, 4.8 out of 5. And it's generally there's 3 or 4, service, advice and value, I think, are the 3 categories which make up the overall review. And it's quite often that service and advice get a 5-star and value might get a 4-star. So you do tend to see on vouched for 4.6, 4.7, 4.8. Very rarely do you see 1-star. So it's interesting to compare the difference between vouched for and Google, but you're right, it is quite binary on Google.
Before coming to you, Brian, Alan's asked a question that's related to that. So I'm just going to finish off this topic and then come to you, if that's okay, Brian, on Trustpilot. Any views on Trustpilot?
Yeah, I do. It's not, this, for me, we spent a lot of time thinking about this and where people should target their online reviews. Should it be Google Vouch for, Trustpilot, Facebook, etc.? And we came down on the side of Google and Vouch for. Google, because it's on that first page where prospects will meet their financial planner. It's so prominent in a Google search results. So that's why we went for that one. And the second, the reason we went for Vouch for, there's a few here. First, it should generate 1 or 2 new inquiries a quarter if you use it correctly. So it should wash its face in the first year in terms of initial advisor fees and the costs. There's a whole load of reputational tools within Vouch for. So even if they didn't do the lead gen bit, £45 a month, I'd still pay that as a planner for those reputational tools. The moderation of reviews. If you get a bad review on Vouch for, you cannot take it down by getting them to send them an email and beg. They are really strict that they won't take poor reviews down, assuming it's not fake. And they've got the Times top rated guide they've done the last couple of years. They do a lot to support the profession. So for me, and also on Vouch for, another big reason, on a brand search for a planner's name, then it will come up in the search results. So for me, it wasn't, didn't particularly like Trustpilot. It was more that much preferred Vouched for and Google.
Great, thank you. Brian, can I come to you?
Sure. Phil, very interesting. Amira just asked my LinkedIn question, so I'll go back to my original question, which was, we worked with Google on SEO with a big financial client some years ago. And I have to tell you, it was a really, really interesting experience. And basically, their sole objective as a corporation is to get in the middle of every single human and business interaction and monetize it. You mentioned some issues around taking down bad reviews and so on and so forth. I won't go into it now, but there's a lot of backstory around their business model built around really capturing people, whether it's a financial advisor, a restaurateur, whatever, and literally drilling into that relationship and getting money out of it. Have you had any experiences in that regard? You were talking about the trolling, the low rating, the bifurcation of ratings, which, by the way, their algo does a lot of that on purpose, so that people will react exactly as you do, wondering where the middle ground is. So have you worked with Google directly on anything for any of your clients?
No, I think at the moment we're probably too small to interest Google as an organization. Who knows where it might end up. But no, we've not worked directly with Google. But you're right, they're ubiquitous, aren't they? They sit in the middle of, I'd love to sit and calculate how many times we Google something each day. But we just do it all the time. It's our natural default thing to do, isn't it? Even to the extent of, I can't type the website address in, I'm just going to Google it and it'll pick up the typos and away I go. But you're right, they absolutely sit between that awareness and they create awareness, but they sit between awareness and taking action. And they curate people's decisions to a large degree.
Yeah. Just as an aside, my Morgan Stanley client years ago went to interview to work with them. She used Gmail. They had mined every word in her Gmail. They knew all about her. They knew her children's names. They knew her title at Morgan Stanley. They interviewed her for 2 hours in 3 waves just to basically do a brain download. She never heard from them again.
Wow.
It's really about gathering knowledge through search, through Gmail, through other products they have, because they really eventually want to disintermediate humans from these kinds of business interactions.
And they make their money, much like Facebook, from data. They're data organizations.
Data's the new capital.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just watching for the second time. I'm 2/3 of the way through the Big Hack the great hack, the big hack.
Yeah.
That's fascinating around Google, Cambridge, Facebook, Cambridge Analytica, all that sort of stuff. Fascinating.
Thank you.
And Amira, how's the storm? Are you able to ask your
I'm
question?
not sure if you can actually even hear the rain in the background. It's probably chucking it down here, which is good. My question was, Phil, once you've done the website bit, where do you go next? Where would you advise businesses to focus on? Is it Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, or even the really weird ones now? I've heard of a couple of, American IFAs that are even starting to get into the TikTok sort of market. That might be a bit too much for the UK world, but where would you go?
Okay, so are we answering this in the assumption that the aim is to create new client inquiries?
Yeah, or increase that social proof even about yourself as a person to engage with that trust and empathy thing.
Okay, so the answer is the same. I would start by going to existing clients. Yes, social media's got a part to play, but I'm not one of those marketing people that would say it's all about social. If you go to an agency that specializes in social media, the answer you will get to every question is social media. If all you sell is hammers, everything looks like a nail. And people, financial planning firms we work with, they do a fantastic job for their clients. But they rarely go back to them. They certainly don't go back to them with anything that resembles a coherent referral strategy. And a lot of, I'm not saying that the old habits were necessarily great, but if we go back maybe to when, I don't know, let's pick on Alan, when Alan and I started in the profession, the way we try to generate referrals, at least we had an idea about doing it and we're prepared to put a bit of shoe leather into doing it. But very rarely now do firms have a referral strategy, and referrals are without doubt the best type of new inquiry. They've already heard positive things. They've got an immediate need. Otherwise, why are they looking for a financial planner? So they have the highest conversion rate and the lowest cost of acquisition. So the first place I would go back to, Amira, if I was trying to increase the number of inquiries I was getting, would be to go back to existing clients and put in place a referral strategy. And then frankly, I'll be going back to them for developing my social proof. I'd use social media to potentially show off my social proof, but generate it and to generate referrals, I'd be going back to my existing client.
I love that answer, Phil. Thank you.
I'll go with that.
Yeah, really good advice. Helena, you have made a couple of comments about PR for financial services and how the industry or financial planners and the industry, I think, are viewed. Do you want to prompt Phil on that a bit?
I completely agree with the social proof stuff. I think that's one of the key things, but we're still only reaching a small amount of people, aren't we? So if only 9% of people in the UK are getting advice and people are not engaged with financial services because they find it boring, they don't think it's interesting, or they don't trust us, we need to probably look at beyond that. So how do we go beyond that? How do we go beyond to prove, or not to prove, but just to advocate really what we do for clients and the benefits of using financial service professionals?
For me, you get the 9% to convince the 91%, or at least the 91% who are prepared to consider engaging. If you haven't experienced financial planning, you can't advocate for it. So for me, it's about getting those. We talk a lot about turning suspects into prospects, prospects into clients, clients into advocates. And it's those advocates who will talk at length about the benefits of financial planning. So for me, it's using the 9% to convince the others.
It's interesting that you say that. We've just spent an hour on a call talking about articulating our value. And I think if you can't connect those two, you're going to struggle to convince 91% that it's actually any good. I'm playing devil's advocate here because I really think it's a problem. Sorry.
No, it absolutely is a problem. And there's myriad reasons why it's a problem. But if I'm trying to convince, let's say I was trying to convince a prospect for the Yardstick Agency about the value of working with us, I'm going to get them to speak to an existing client, because that existing client will do a far better job about convincing the prospect about the value of working with us. But I completely agree that it is the penetration of financial planning is awful. We need to do more. We need to do more to match propositions to need. So the need of a 20-year-old and a 30-year-old is very different to the need of, I don't know, parents or their grandparents. And we need to match pricing to that proposition and those target groups as well. And a traditional financial planning firm who wants to work with people who have already accumulated in their 50s and 60s need a different pricing model and different proposition model for engaging the generation below that. And I think until that message gets through, it's going to be very difficult to engage younger generations who make up a large proportion of that 91%.
Actually, quite a lot of people don't seek advice. That's shocking. You know, if you look at the damage that can mean to someone's actual sustainability of being able to afford retirement, I think we definitely need to be putting a message out as to what we do for people, because it's so much more than linking them from what they need to a product. It's a huge amount in between. But anyway, I'm digressing.
It's a really powerful way to, I mean, you can imagine if your clients were talking about the value, or not your clients, but if clients of financial planning, of financial planners were talking about the value that they were getting, and financial planners were sharing that on social media instead of taking jibes at one another, it would maybe that would help a little bit.
Yeah, I wrote about that in Money Marketing last week. We need to coalesce around a flag that financial planning benefits people, not, like you say, Heather, taking lumps out of people on social. It's pointless.
Yeah. Paul, you wanted to give a couple of examples, websites that delivered.
Yes, that's okay. I mean, it does come back to that, sorry, just to finish on that last point, it does come back to communication again, doesn't it? And whether people actually understand the language that we use, because they don't. And financial services generally is a very boring subject to anybody, isn't it? Outside our industry, let's be honest. And it's great that I hear about people going to universities and teaching financial planning, explaining what it is, you know, because if you ask a graduate what is financial planning, they just won't know what that is, will they? So that's the sort of thing I love talking about. But I want to give you a couple of examples, and I'm desperately sorry I can't give you the name of the firm, but I'll find out for next week and give it to you. But they're a very professional financial planning business, and they've massively increased new business inquiries because of their website. You know, it's really important because nowadays people will just go to your website, won't they? You know, we go to websites. The great thing about their site also is that you can book appointments with them. You can choose the advisor you want to book an appointment with, and you can choose a drink that you'll get on entry to their offices. And they'll even have a selection of gin and tonics, depending on the time that you come into the office, different beers. It's just being something different, but they are having great success out of that. The other thing I want to sort of talk about in terms of efficiency is that, you know, the back office system world is a place where it's truly CRM. And therefore, if someone goes to your website and wants to make an inquiry, as soon as they push that inquiry page, whereas normally, you know, years gone by, it's gone into an email box somewhere, this will actually go directly into your back office system. It will send something out to the client based on actually their inquiry. It will put information into the back office. It will send an inquiry internally to an advisor to pick up the phone to speak to those people. So the website, for me, Phil, I'm just reinforcing the fact that I think it's such an important area for people right now. And it's, you know, technology is moving on at such a pace that you can become really efficient and increase your client numbers.
Yeah, I completely agree. The one thing I would say, the caveat I would add to that is actually the Google search results page is your homepage in many occasions. And that's why it's so important to curate that and ensure it's as you dominate it, you're as visible as possible, and as you're impressive. Because in most cases, the gateway through to your website is Google.
Phil, I want to come back to something you said at the beginning. You recommended that that people run, or firms run, a social proof audit. What specifically did you mean by that?
So what I mean by that is understanding. I literally would create a list of different types of social proof. So what do we have? Online ratings and reviews. What do we have through client surveys? When was the last time we ran a client survey? What do we have that is at a granular level that demonstrates a client telling others about the value of financial planning, the value of what we do? Do we have videos? Do we have case studies? If all we've got is anonymous testimonials, we can do better than that. The average, we did some research looking at testimonial pages on financial planner websites. And the average testimonial page on a financial planner's website gets between 1 and 2 visits out of every 100 visitors on the site. It's tiny. You might as well not have them. They're useless. We've got one firm that we started to work with. We didn't design their website. To get one person on the testimonials page, they need to get 300 on the website. It's just ridiculous. Testimonial pages are pointless. So literally, for me, it's a case of working my way down the list of different types of social proof: Vouchboard, Google, Trustpilot, testimonials, client videos, client stories, awards, that sort of stuff, and ticking them off. What do we have? What don't we have? And therefore, what gaps have we got left to fill? And you can talk about how you use it in a different conversation, but just literally working down that list and seeing what we've got, how it's being interacted with, and where are our gaps.
Great, thank you. Any final questions? I'm looking for hands before we wrap up. So the last question for me then is, in lockdown, we've seen advisors adapt, as they always do, really quickly to new scenario, new situation. And research that we've done suggests that most have gone to video, but a fair number have gone to phone meetings with clients, and are having different levels of success with that. One of the things that advisors have said to me is they're not yet sure how well video works for working with new customers, because most of the people that they're even new clients coming on board now, it's about a 3-month process from the initial meeting with the client. So a lot of the people that they're bringing on as clients now, they met with prior to lockdown, and so they're not sure yet how things will go with inquiries that they're getting. And they've had a lot of inquiries, been a lot of interest, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on whether that's true. But the advisors I've talked to have said a lot of inbound inquiries, but not sure people are going to act, might postpone decisions, might have a bit more time, so might be looking at their options of getting things organized, but might not take action. I'd be interested to hear from you whether you've seen any change in conversion rates, in the types of customers that advisors are bringing on, in how they're finding advisors, how they're locating the advisor in the first place.
Okay. So in terms of video calls with brand new clients, they've never actually met, and it started as an online relationship. I've heard different things. There's a chap, financial planner called TFP Financial Planning, called Dan Haler, and he's talked about how he's had some really great first meetings, and he's actually preferred doing them on Zoom than face-to-face, and feels the meeting has been enhanced by the fact it's been remote, which is fascinating. I suspect that's more to do with Dan's positive outlook on things. I've seen other firms who will remain nameless who have just avoided Zoom completely and are trying to delay client reviews until such time as things are back in normal. And I think they underestimated how long things would be abnormal abnormal for. And it's going to continue like this for, who knows. So a real mixture. And it'll be really interesting to see whether people go back to face-to-face meetings, do a mixture of face-to-face and video. Still see firms though struggling with video, still getting the view up some people's nostrils after 3 or 4 months. You think these things will be sorted by now, but that's really quite frustrating, I think, and doesn't create a great experience for clients. Then in terms of lead levels, we're seeing website traffic and lead levels coming back to normal, and seeing firms trying to accelerate out of this crisis. It's been a tough time for a lot of them, and we're seeing firms trying to accelerate out, putting the foot on the gas with their marketing and using some of the time that they've got now, and some of them have got some budget because they've applied for bounce back loans, and why wouldn't you at 2.5%? But they've got a bit of time, they've got a bit of money, and therefore they're taking that time out. Now clients are reassured and markets are benign to work on their marketing, and I suspect that will pay dividends as well. Because I firmly believe how you act right now as a business, as individuals in the business, take the business that you have in 5 years' time. So put the hard yards in now, and it will pay off in years to come. Great,
thank you. That confirms some of the things I'm hearing from advisors too, that they're finding video calls can be more focused. The client has all the documents, and so there's none of this, oh, I don't have that with me, I'll get it to you after, and so the sort of back and forth that happens afterwards. So I'm hearing from advisors that they can be both more efficient but also better quality meetings, which is great. We just did a piece of work for Fidelity that found that advisors who've gone to phone, who've resisted that shift to Zoom, are the ones who are really keen to get back to face-to-face meetings, but advisors who've moved to video are much more open to, or expect to continue with video or a hybrid approach to meetings. So it'll be interesting how that evolves and develops. I'm going to pass to Rose in a second. I'm looking for Rose. I don't see her on my screen. Oh, there she is. In a sec, just to cue us up for next week. But first, I want to say thank you, Phil. I thought that was a really great session with lots of practical stuff. And I have some homework to go away and do, because we don't have a testimonials page, but our reviews are a little bit out of date. So we probably need to refresh that on our website. And I need to look at my social proof. I love the phrase you used, that the Google search results page is your homepage. You're absolutely right. I was at a conference a couple of years ago where somebody said, Google your company, Google your name, that's who you are. And I was a bit disturbed because there was this like 18-year-old actress in the US who came up for my name, but Next Wealth was a much better profile. So a really helpful session.